Oh, my name is Marceline Green, but everybody in Balch Springs knows me as Marcy. Very well known, I think. I lived out here since 1953, the same year that Balch Springs was incorporated.
My name is John Ralston, and my father's was Dr. Norman C. Ralston, who had the LBJ Animal Clinic.
My name is Jim Jarvis. I grew up in Balch Springs in the 40s and 50s.
I'm David Haas. I am the Chief Billing Official for the City of Balch Springs and the Emergency Management Coordinator. I've lived in the City of Balch Springs over 30 years.
My name is Brenda Haas. We moved to Balch Springs in March of '79, so we've been in the city for 34 years.
My name is Wayne Middleton. I've lived in Balch Springs since 1962.
Well, my name is Opal Smith, and I moved to Balch Springs in February of 1963.
We moved out here in 1953 when it was just building up. Now, down there in the neighborhood on Woodbury Road, it was a good neighborhood. All of us were good friends with one another and enjoyed visiting with one another. The kids played in each other's yards and rode their bikes out in the street. Once in a while, you'd see a new head at the table. One of the little neighbor kids had come through and seen a big chocolate pudding sitting there, and he'd invited himself to supper.
When I was a kid growing up in Balch Springs, it was rural. There was probably no more than 500 people entire lived in what's now Balch Springs.
Well, although I don't remember the population, we moved here in '79, but I remember that there were some activities for the kids. And again, having 3 small children when we moved here, there were sports activities for our son, which we'd been heavily involved in back home. We had come up with a football league back in our little East Texas town of Redwater that we were responsible for. So to have those activities moved here for the kids was great. The girls were only 2 and 4 at the time, so that's a little challenging for something for them. A lot of things have changed in the city. What was here then is there used to be a Dairy Queen on the corner, 2 Dairy Queens in the town. There's not one today, so you can remember those type things. The town was a lot smaller, obviously. It's grown over the years we've been here, so I don't, again, remember the population, but it couldn't have been more than probably 14,000, 15,000 at that time.
My dad used to bring my bicycle over here, and it was, to me, what I did a lot of times, and you gotta understand, he had his practice over on Buckner that was his established practice, but we were trying to establish this. He would turn me loose on my bicycle, and I could ride down Lake June to the Tom Thumb Shopping Center and go and eat at their deli because they had a old deli in there. Well, that was a big thing for me, you know, because Lake June was not as busy as what it is today.
We didn't have any drive-ins. We didn't have a Jack in the Box. We had to go to Mesquite to get a hamburger, except Bill's Betty Burger was there, and it's still there, and they've always had good food. And we just didn't have a lot of businesses. And I don't remember the population, but it was nothing like it is now.
You're not going to believe it, but back in the late 80s and 90s in Balch Springs, we had a real gang problem. Graffiti was everywhere. You had the Cottonwood Posse. You had the Pleasant Grove Creps. You had the Bloods. The Bloods were over here off of Elam, just this side of Cheyenne in our town. And it got pretty crazy in that we were right on the verge. We had a couple little drive-by shootings that they would do. But one of the main things, I'm the reason for our curfew that we have today for juveniles. I also created a gang unit, and the gang unit went on a very aggressive mode with the police department and we basically shut the gangs down in Balch Springs.
You know, there probably weren't a whole lot of changes that were made during my term. I did only serve one term, but I think what we did was we got back on the momentum of what had been there for the 6 years David had been mayor, try to turn some things back around, get them moving again. We kept the library project on target, even though it wasn't built during my tenure as mayor. It was built a couple of tenures later. So just keeping it on track and keeping it focused on it, I think, was one thing. Again, not my term, but David's term, we built Kidstown, which was a major undertaking for the city, and it's just something I was very proud to be involved in, as I'll say, the first lady of the city at that time. But we raised funds for a year, and we moved, you know, again, Kidstown was history too. It was what it was. It took us a week to build it and another week to finally critique it and open it up. So it was a pleasure to work on that project.
A lot of changes were already in place. Brenda Hawes had the vision of the library, and I don't know if she had the vision of the Civic Center in, but it became a turmoil with the library and the Civic Center. And when I became mayor, I stepped in and finished the library. It was Brenda Hawes' dream. The Civic Center was originally supposed to be an animal shelter. And we moved from an animal shelter to a civic center because Miss Ellen's restaurant, the Pine Tree Garden, would have had to close down because you cannot have a restaurant and an animal shelter beside each other. And the animal shelter behind City Hall, we put a new one back there because the old one was falling down. So that's why we made the civic center there, put the animal shelter behind City Hall. And during the process, we took the retention pond that was over here between the library and the civic center. It was only 3 or 4 feet deep. And I got with David Haas, and we dug it out. It's like 12, 16 feet deep. It's a pretty deep little hole in the ground.
I see this town growing. I really do. I see the one thing that I would really say that I think has been a key thing in the growth of this city is the vision that our mayor has had since she has been the mayor of Balch Springs.
We are progressing every day. We're getting new businesses in. We've had 3 housing developments finish out, so we've increased our population. They're not custom homes, but they're above your regular little tract home. We got businesses booming. Lake June, look at Lake June. Right now, Lake June's the place to be. All the new businesses going in on Lake June. We got some couple of businesses coming in on Elam here in the next 6 months or so. So yeah, I see nothing but good things.
As living in the city as long as we have, and we've watched the city change and evolve into what it is, the businesses moving in, the number of houses that have come about, I just see it continuing to prosper. We are limited on our space, so there's a lot, you know, what we can and can't do from a space aspect, but we're trying to develop the I-20 corridor down here and get that all moving, and there's space there to be done. The projects they're trying to bring in there will be great. I just see it progressing and growing and prospering as a small city, and small in size, but not small in growth and tenure and numbers.
I hope Balch Springs grows. I hope it has a very bright future ahead of itself. I hope that the people in Balch Springs make a community and get out and be part of each other.
I just see Balch Springs as a little town, but yet a growing town, and where we can have all the things here that we need and not have to go to Mesquite or a rock wall or something.